Hey, Dorothy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to 52 Weeks of Leadership. I believe this is week 44 installment of 52 weeks. So we're coming in on the final stretch of sessions. Glad that you could be able to join us. I'm Paul Teslick, Dean of the School of Management. And I have the distinct pleasure of being able to introduce our speaker for this week, who is Chad Chu, who is associate who is the Associate Director for the Center for Workplace Leadership at the University of Southern Australia and is also a professor there. Chad is actually a graduate from our PhD program here in the School of Management and was my very first PhD student when I came to UB, and it has just been incredibly successful taking work on shared leadership and taking it into some new and really exciting directions. And Chad is going to talk in particular about some of the work that he's been doing in the area of leadership burnout. And I think we all are probably seeing this. We're either maybe personally experiencing it, or we're seeing burnout in our teams or with those around us. So I think this is a really timely topic to be able to delve into a little bit. The research that Chad is going to be talking about today is work that he's doing that he has kind of ongoing right now. So this is research in real time. It doesn't get any more kind of fresh and leading edge than this. So thanks for being part of this. I also want to, of course, acknowledge Geico for their strong sponsorship of this session. Chad is going to be presenting for about 20 or 25 minutes in typical 52 weeks fashion. We will have a chance at the end to be able to have some Q&A. So please feel free to direct your questions into the chat, either as they come to you during the session, and I'll moderate the Q&A at the end, or if you want to wait and save them till the end, putting them into the chat is a great way to be able to do that. And would love to be able to get your questions and input and sharing your thoughts and ideas with Dr. Chu here today. So having said that and got things kind of started, I'll turn it over to you, Chad.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, everyone. It's my great pleasure to virtually talk about these topics. And honestly, although we met through Zoom, I just feel like I just go home to Buffalo. So as Paul just introduced, my name is Chad Chu. I'm Associate Director of the Center for Workplace Excellence, or you can call it CWEX. So basically what I'm going to introduce today is an ongoing project of me, conducted by me and my RAs and my colleagues at CWEX. And we hope to understand that how could you protect yourself to avoid leadership burnout? You see anything that you can do that personally to protect your own energy. So let me give you some sort of backgrounds about what leads us to have this idea. So, about myself, like I originally from Taiwan, so I'm met in Taiwan. I finished my college degrees and my MBA in Taiwan. I spent 2 years in armies. And after that, I went to Buffalo to take my PhD. And fortunately, I have Paul to be my supervisors. I even spent 1 year as a research fellow at the Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness. So actually, this to me is kind of going home. So one day when I worked for the Chloe, and one day Paul just knocked my door and saying that, "Hey Chaz, we have I have friends in South Australia. They are looking for junior faculties. Are you interested?" And my first reaction is like, "Yeah. So do they have snow in winter?" Um, And Paul just told me no. And I just say, okay, I'm in. So my family and I moved to South Australia about 6 years ago. And this is a great place for raising their families, great mentorship. So at UniSA, University of South Australia, my research is mainly around shared leadership with Paul and some sort of positive leadership style, like leader humility, inclusive leadership. And for my teachings, I mainly teach leadership development course for MBAs and EMBA students at UniSA. Because currently I take this position as an associate director for this research center. One of my major duty is to conduct public talk or leadership workshop for the local managers or the government officers. So that's what I usually do at UniSA and my research and teaching interest. So here's the things that at business school, honestly, doesn't matter which business school you go to, usually we advise people to become positive leaders. All right, so we hope that managers or employees, they can show their leadership quality or capabilities by delivering positive a message or try to tell people, try to communicate with their followers with the positive values. So some typical examples like, we try to advise people to be humble as a leader, to be inclusive, to be transformational. And honestly, like being a servant leader is very important, like put followers first, you're building communities. And actually those advice, they are not just come from the theories. We have accumulated empirical study have shown that if your managers, your organizational leaders, they try to embrace those behavior styles or embrace those leadership style, usually you will get a better employee performance or better creativities from the employees. If you are team leaders, your team will perform better and the team members, they want to stay in the team. And if you're CEOs, you will get a better company finance performance. So we get all kind of empirical data to support the idea, except for one thing. Every time when I talk about those positive leadership style, and people will raise a question to me like, Chad, that was a cool idea, but why don't we have too many positive leadership example at work? All right, so if you want to promote like leader humility, but in reality, we don't really have a lot of humble leader at work as example. And I don't know if that is the truth. So I try to Google the terms like my boss is. And the result is quite negative. Honestly, like most of the result we can find is so negative. Like my boss is rude to me, my boss is micromanagers. If you change the term like my boss to my managers or my leader, well, you will get a very similar result. And to me, honestly, as a researcher and as a lecturer at a university, this is very disappointing result. Like we spend so much time and energy to tell people that you need to be positive, you need to be positive. But at the end, and most of the people, when they see or evaluate their managers or boss, they still see their boss as devil's will product. So I'm trying to look at the factors why will lead to this situation. And one of the factors is that, well, being positive leader could be exhausting, all right? So one of the theoretical approach, we call that the conservation of resources theory, is that each individual like us, we have only limited resources like our time, cognitive attention, or even energy level to complete our job. For leaders, most of the most important resources for you is your energetic activation. It's your psychological energy level. All right. So it's more like your subjective feelings of vitality, vigor, or enthusiasm at work. So here's the things. We spend our energies to manage workplace relationship, to be a good leader, to be a positive leader. But if we don't know how to recharge ourselves, we will step into a trap we call the ego depletion, that we use out all of our energy to do the self-control, try to prioritize others' needs, for example. And at the end, we don't really have any energy left for us to be or to continue our positive style. So several examples that we have in the literature, like, people figure out that if you keep engaging your ethical leadership behavior, at the end, if you don't really charge yourself, the ego depletion will lead you to more abusive leaders' behavior, because that will help you to save some energy. If you're more like the self-sacrificial leaders, well, you will face more work-family conflicts at home, because you don't really feel guilty that you spend too much time at work. And the recent study even shows that if you engage in too much servant leadership behavior and you don't really recharge yourself, leaders eventually will become more passive and avoid responsibilities. So this is something like really like me and my colleagues, that we really want to look at how do we, if we expect leaders to be positive and always help others, we need to help them to figure out how they can protect themselves before they help others. All right, so this is something that we call that ocean max. We hope to figure out that how leaders can find their own ocean max and protect their own energy, so their positive leadership style can be sustainable. So we firstly take a look at what is the latest literature suggests. We should figure out that what really exhausts people at work are three major factors. A, you get really low social support. It's either like you don't really get the support from your boss or your colleagues or even your subordinates, or high workloads plus high emotional demands, or high workload plus low autonomies. So those are the three factors that actually exhaust people. But what is the sad news from the study is that if you look at what can really recharge people at work, they find nothing, not even for the low workload plus high autonomy. So that just reminds us that if we want to find some ocean mask, we need to find some ocean masks, not just at work, but also in their life, in our daily life. So this is why, this is a research background, how and why is that we want to conduct this study. So I just want to give you a background information that in South Australia, so we do have a lockdown because of COVID pandemic during July to December last year. So what we do is that during that period, we try to interview middle managers from the healthcare industries in South Australia or in Adelaide. So the population of the city Adelaide is about the 1.3 million. And we want to focus on the healthcare industry because those people are the only people can go to work day to day during the lockdown period. So they probably will face more pressures that others will experience during that lockdown time. So at the end, that we interviewed 45 managers through Zoom. Unfortunately, that we cannot do the face-to-face interviews. We can only do this through Zoom. There are three major questions that we try to address. What makes you feel tired? How do you protect yourself at or after work? And finally, how does the COVID-19 influence your own energy level? So those are the three major questions that we try to ask. And this is some preliminary result we find, and we focus on like what makes people feel tired. And most of the factors, as you can see, are highly they are confirming that the previous study suggests like low support, high workloads, high emotional demands, high workload plus low autonomy. So we're trying to categorize those factors into personal, interpersonal, and structural. And not surprisingly, people will talk about, oh, some structural factors like there are too many management duties. They don't really get enough admin support. The constant change internally and externally just make them feel tired. The interpersonal factors like the management work relationships or maybe the leader's expectations, those are fit the categories of either low support or high workload, high emotional demands. But what really surprising us is that not everybody, actually I can say the majority of people, they don't really start about complaining their companies. They start to complain, they start to talk about their personal lifestyle. Like they feel tired even before they go to work. It's just because that their health conditions for both physically or mentally is not ideal. They have really unhealthy lifestyle or habits. I think a few people talk about their drinking problems. And people also mention about their family responsibilities, that they have young kids to take care of. They have the very sick parents to take care of. So that has been said. It's not just about the work factors that make them feel tired, but even before they go to work, there are some personal factors that most of people we are not aware of. Those are the daily like factors consuming our own energy. So we keep asking, like, how do you protect yourself? And we try to categorize those factors into what you can do immediately at work and what you can do after every day after you finish your work, and what you can do in the long run. And we'll start with the Ocean Max during the work days. So some sort of easy things like, take a deep breath, drink plenty of water. Those kind of things can help you to reboost your physical energy and to help you to feel better about your physical condition. And other things like having a better task management style, put the boundaries about your days and limits, and instead you limits, knows that you are just a human, you cannot accomplish anything. This is something that you can do immediately at work. And some interpersonal action max is that, people talk about during the lockdown because they are the only people can go to work, and that's the same for their followers and their colleagues. So making connections, keeping the interaction with their colleagues and others at work become really important for them at the times during the lockdown. So I want to highlight like that, I put the availabilities of interpersonal Ocean Max during the COVID-19 restrictions here. Those are all available, but it's just for my participants. For people who are not allowed to go to work, they don't even have those Ocean Max they can use. And that becomes even worse when we talk about what you can do, what usually people can do after the work days. People talk about, well, take the dog for long walks, or leave your phone at home when you go for a walk. A lot of people talk about walk your dogs, or just take some sort of just take a walk, just keep yourself away from the work. It's really important. But the problem is that during the COVID-19 lockdown, that kind of Ocean Max, that kind of activity is not available. So there's a reason why that people feel even more tired during the COVID-19. And the same situation is for the interpersonal Ocean Max. Before the COVID-19, people recharge themselves mainly because they have these social well-being activities, like they visit or babysit their grandchildren, catch up with their families or friends, go out to drinks and eat. Those are the important activities for them to manage their own energy level after the work. But unfortunately, because of COVID-19, those activities are not viable. So again, so before COVID, we don't really realize that how much those activities means to me. But during the 19th, most of the participants that we interviewed actually revealed their concern that they cannot have that. Something about long-term, like playing in holidays, go shoppings, or some people they have the habit to play sports. Unfortunately, those activities are not available during the COVID-19 lockdown. So that's the reason why that my participants get really stressful when we interview them. I think 4 to 5 people even have a very emotional reaction during the interviews. So what we try to recommend based on those preliminary data analysis result is this 3 A's model. We hope that how to prevent the potential leadership burnout. We hope that people can take care of the 3 A's activities like awareness, actions, and advocacy for changes. The first one is awareness. That not everybody knows that they have their own boundary as a leader. Sometimes that we just have this mentalities that, oh, we can do more, we could do more, but you're just a human. So recognize the fact that you have a limited energy at work to use, and it is normal for you to feel tired. You need to have that awareness that you could feel tired. That's really normal. That's normal for every leaders. And the second one is that you have to take some actions. When I talk about the action, it's not just at work, but outside of work. You have to prepare your work energy in your daily life. So find your ocean mask. And remember, those ocean mask activity is really a profile-based strategy. That has been said, what works for you may not work for me. All right, so for example, a lot of people talk about walk with your dog, and I'm a cat person. I can never understand how walk your dog is energizing. Same for play with your kids, all right? So people will feel that this is something they feel energized and recharging. But for me, playing with my daughter is always exhausting. What I'm saying is that your ocean max need to reflect your true identity. You must to believe that that's something that really reflects that your passions outside your work, and you need to have that. Most of people's ocean max actions are limited during the work lockdown, unfortunately. And finally, is that because you're a leader, that you're a role model at work. So in the past, you probably worked really hard to get a promotion, but what gets you here probably won't get you later. And you need, if you want to take care of your followers' well-being and health, you need to set a role model to take care of take a good care of yourself first. So one of the example is the CEO of United Airlines that in 2016 he received a huge heart transplant surgery after a heart attack, but he refused to stop shaking people's hands post the surgery. And people describe things like he puts his life at risk to lead the United Airlines. And what is the consequences? If your CEO doesn't really cares about his or her own energy or well-being, and the followers won't take care of their own health and well-being, and not mentioned about the customers. So that's the reason why in 2017 you can see this this news about there's a overbooking problems, and the flight attendant, they force customers to leave, and they even ask the security to be the customers because they prioritize those authorities and policies over customers' health and well-being. So to wrap up, I mean, if you think yourself as a good leader, as a positive leader, put down your ocean max first is really important. In the past, we have this wrong impressions that, you have to spend all of your time and energy at work, but it is not the reality at all. All we found is that effective leaders are healthy and energized. If you are a good ex, you need to be protected, and you probably want to take some actions starting from now. Well, thank you. Thank you for your listening. I'm welcome to any questions. If you are interested in like the follow-up, the other aspect of this study, so you can go to my personal website. I usually share the research reports here. And any questions, welcome.
Hey, great. Thank you, Chad. So interesting. And again, I'd encourage everyone to, if you have questions or thoughts you want to share, to put them into the chat. As people maybe think about that, Chad, one question that I had, I know you were doing this and collecting this data during the pandemic. And of course, everybody's talking now, and we're kind of seeing this, I think, at least here in the US, we're seeing people who are kind of stepping out of their jobs. They're maybe kind of taking a break, taking a pause, reevaluating, because the whole pandemic experience has made them kind of rethink their own personal priorities, which again, I think is why this topic is so timely. When you think about the awareness, actions, and advocacy, as these elements that help you be able to fix your oxygen mask in a way that's going to be helpful for you as a leader. Is there an opportunity in this period that we're in right now, as we're kind of transitioning to the new normal, where a lot of people are kind of rethinking things for themselves, maybe trying to be able to have a little bit more balance in their lives, a little bit more build in more of some of the things that you're talking about? Can you maybe speak a little bit to that? And is that something that you're going to be able to capture in your research?
Sure. Thank you, Paul. The awareness, the 3A's model sounds really intuitive, and people think, oh, this is not surprising at all. But when we interview our participants, not everybody knows that they can say they are tired. About 50% of people just said, oh, I never thought about that. They just respond that, oh, I never thought about that. I can say I'm really tired of work. And about 1/3 of the participants, when we ask them, how do you protect themselves? And they become silent. And they say, oh, I never think about that. So Paul, when you ask what we can do immediately, I would say, well, first of all, you probably want to think about that, the awareness part, that are you tired? Ask yourself the question, because at the times that if you see yourself as a strong leader, you don't really know that your body just tells you that no, it's too much. Sometimes we think that if we work hard, that we can use our willpower to overcome anything. But I think the first step is to have the mentality that you are just a human. You are a good leader, and you are also a human. So if you want to become a positive leader, a good leader in the future, you want to start to take care of good care of yourself from now. I think that's the first step.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I guess as I was thinking about your research, what I was thinking about the leaders of the leaders. So you talked about, the CEO of United Airlines, and are you setting a positive example or a negative example when you're kind of doing something like that, where right after major heart surgery, you say, I'm going to go back to maybe putting myself at my health at risk by shaking hands again? Or maybe would you say, I've got a frailty here, and I have to look out for the interests of the organization by putting my health as a priority. And I expect and hope that everyone else in a leadership role will be maybe doing some of the same, because we're the long-term interests of the organization and our employees are, if we as leaders show up every day energized, feeling excited and engaged, and we have to make sure that we're carving out a place and a space to be able to maintain and keep that energy level and our own health and well-being and happiness high. I think that's maybe a different message sometimes than leaders feel like you have to be this invincible superhero, and any signal of frailty or weakness sends the wrong message. And I think what your work is actually showing is that it's really the opposite, which is interesting.
Definitely.
So there's a question here, if I might. Rick Steinberg is asking, is there any research on the relative strength of the 8 consuming energy factors? So I think the question is getting at, are those Is there anything that indicates as to which of those is going to be more stronger or more relevant in one circumstance or another, or are they more kind of universal?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think that according to the latest AMJ study on the Academy of Management Journal, I think having a low social support is the #1 factor, followed by high workloads and high emotional demands. And the third factors will be the high demands plus low autonomy. But usually like a low social support will be the #1. That when we talk about social support, it's either from your boss, from your colleagues, and even from your family, honestly.
Mm. And that's something that can be done and addressed in a lot of ways. I mean, from an organization standpoint, having a culture that where kind of social support is kind of part of the fabric of the organization. But to your point, you can also do that by making sure that you're spending time and investing your energy in your own support network too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question here is Jessica is asking, what are some ways that we can recognize burnout in colleagues who are in leadership roles or those who lead us? What might be some early warning signs so that if you do want to try and bring that to their attention constructively or provide some, to the point, social support, other things that you can do to help them, what are some things that you should be looking for?
Well, I think that's a good question. I don't really have a concrete answer from my data at this moment, but this is something like I observed from the literature is that if you look at someone, you just realize that the person's behavior is so different from like at works and like in private, and you realize that there must be some things that make the persons behave in a negative way at work. But in reality, the person is not so bad. So the person might be exhausted and burned out. So being a toxic leader or being like behave in a negative way is the mechanism for them to protect themselves. But in reality, if you hang out with this person, you just realize that he or she is not so bad. And that's a sign of like being burned out from my observation from the data.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the behavioral science shows that we often make attributions about people's character without necessarily trying to understand or be curious about what are the underlying true causes of the behavior. So to your point, someone who might comes across as exhibiting some toxic leadership, it really might be a function of them dealing with some burnout and maybe things either whether on the personal side or things that they're wrestling with in their leadership role that they're not feeling supported, etc. And so you need to kind of withhold the judgment and try and better understand what's maybe going on with some of those signs. Something else that I was thinking of as you were describing and giving that example is, during during this life that we live with Zoom calls, we're often, waiting for a couple minutes for everybody to join, and we ask the perfunctory, how are you doing? Maybe we can kind of give it a little twist on that question and say, what's kind of going on that's important for you this week? Just to kind of break the ice a little bit and have people open up a little bit more about things that they might be wrestling with or dealing with. And it strikes me that sometimes there's more that we can be doing to go out of our way to try and take a kind of a genuine interest in our colleagues' lives and others, which is sometimes hard, especially when we're doing so much communication virtually. And it's all kind of focused on the meeting at hand or whatever project we're working on. We don't see each other nearly as much, around the proverbial water cooler, right? So you have to kind of take an extra effort when we're kind of in the hybrid work mode that we're in now.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Chad, this has been great, very informative. I want to thank you for being our featured presenter this week. And I'll just note, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but since you're in Australia, I think this is after 2:30 in the morning, your time. So we do want to be
Thank you.
conscious of your time. And speaking of burnout, we don't want sleep fatigue to be a factor for you. So we're really appreciative. Thanks everyone for joining for 52 weeks this week. Hope you found it was informative. Next week, looking ahead, November 8th, in our 45th installment of 52 weeks is Sanal Hohora, who is going to be talking about leading for creativity. She's one of our PhD students in our organization Human Resources program and doing some really interesting work in that area. And I hope everyone will make a point to join next week. So thanks everyone. We'll sign off and thank you again, Chad.
Thank you, Paul.
Have a great
Thank you,
rest of the
everyone.
week.
See you. Take care.